Salaki, I'm back. I was referring to the story where a story you were at the park, and those other men were talking about King David. Um, and he said, "What was it harassing?" Because they, again, so the easiest way that I can explain it is when you have, and it's not just Israeli people, it could be anyone of European descent as a whole. And I'm not saying that everyone who is of European descent knows this, but you will find a lot of people who do. Like Germans are. My time overseas, I began to realize that Europeans know a lot more than what they let us know. So this is more than just Israeli folk, right? But when you get Europeans who are always like, the one thing that I get here, I don't know about out your way, but the one thing that I get here is, where are your people from? Now, it sounds like an innocent question, and I've been getting this all my life, especially when I was in college. Where are your people from? So the typical response is, well, they're from the South. South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Those are the main states that my family members reside from, who come from the South, right? And everybody who moved north came north because of manufacturing jobs. And this is 1950s and so on and so forth. So something clicked in me one day, and the reason why it clicked, because I listened to patterns, right? Patterns meaning it could be verbal, it could be something that is action based, it could be a behavior. And when I see these patterns over and over and over again, my mind clicks into detective mode. So now I become curious as to why I see these particular patterns happening, right? So what I started to realize, especially when I became this, when I came to learn that I was an Israelite, I began to understand the significance of what that meant. Now, how did I come to this conclusion? Because when I was in college, trying to decide if I should go on for a doctoral, I was dating a young lady who was already in a PhD program, right? She was in marriage and family studies. That was her doctoral program. And she, being a marriage and family therapist, she had a lot of clients that lived on my side of town, meaning away from campus. And one day she said to me that a people without a history are destroyed. Now, it went over my head because I had no idea what she was talking about. But it always stuck with me what she said. So when I began to understand what that meant, I began to do like my own form of observation within my own community to understand, what does that mean? And so now I begin to understand that when a people have no connection to with their roots, it causes confusion, right? So then I begin to ponder a little deeper about that question of, where are you from? Well, they're just trying to see if the black magic, or whether the black magic has worn off or not. So for me to say that I'm African American is like a check. Oh, he's still sleeping, he hasn't woken up to who he is. Or to ask anything about me, about anything that's Africa related, or to just talk about Southern roots, says that this person is sleeping. But when you say, well, I'm an Israelite, well, that's frightening to people. So as I begin to test that out, brother, it's a different world when you expose a different side and you say, well, I know who I am now. I am no longer sleepwalking. That is what's intimidating. So those people in the park are no different They realize that we are a threat, and to know who we are means that their nation, their kingdom is collapsing. That's why, in a nutshell. But as I said, that could be any European. It doesn't have to be with those particular groups of people. It could be all Europeans. You understand? Or you can also think about Arabs, even Africans where the slave trades took place, because they have an understanding of the history of so-called Negroes, West Indians, Haitians. They know that we left the shores of their lands as slaves, and so they will often keep silent about what they know. The majority of people stay silent. When you read Psalms 83, which is what I read every week in the Hebrew and in the English, I'm just sidebarring real quick, and I'm going to go back so I can finish this. This is what Psalms 83 says. Psalms 83 is really the secret, is really the answer to your question. Psalms 83 says, verse 2 says, "For lo, the enemies make a tumult." Echo, what is the definition of tumult?
Tumult is usually defined as violent and noisy commotion or disturbance of a crowd or mob, uproar. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for tumult.
So the enemies have caused an uproar, right? Confusion within our ranks, within our race. You understand? But it says, for the enemies make a tumult, meaning confusion. And it says they have and it says, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. All right. In 3 it says they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. That crafty counsel is all nations coming together to make an agreement that we will never tell these people who they really are. Then it says what? In 4 it says, they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation. Being a nation means we no longer know that we are Israelites. We are now black, African Americans, Negroes, and everything under the sun. We are Haitians. We are West Indians. We are, I don't know, from St. Martin, St. Vincent, Saint this, Saint that, Trinidad, Tobago. That's what we are. We don't call ourselves Israel because we define ourselves according to the landmass that we grew up on. Then it says, and consulted against thy hidden ones. 4 says, they have said, come, let's cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more remembrance. That's why we don't call ourselves Israel, because we take on the identity of the landmass that we've been brought up on, the slave plantation, right? And then it goes on to list the groups of people. It says, and 5 says, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. And it says the tabernacles of Edom, right, which we know to be Europeans, and the Ishmaelites, which happen to be the Arabs, and of Moab, which are the Chinese, the Hagarenes, which are Africans, Gabal, which is an African, Ammon, which are the Japanese, and Amalek, which are the so-called small hats. The Philistines, Africans, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher, Africans, also is joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot, Salah. Do unto them as to the Midianites. So, I'm just bringing it out. Like I have seen people act so nice to Arabs and nicer to them than they are. Well, you will get a variety of behaviors from European people, and it will depend on the situation which you get out of them. People's behaviors change all the time. You understand? But you just want to be mindful not to get tricked into, like we used to say back in the day, There's a saying that we used to say back in the day. If you drop your cell phone, so if I took this phone and I dropped it in a hole, and that hole is filled with snakes, and there are venomous snakes and poisonous snakes. The question is would you put your hand in that hole to retrieve your phone? Now, what's the analogy between a venomous and a non-venomous snake? Is that the one that bites you, that one will unalive you immediately, right? But some snakes don't bite at all, right? Or they don't inject venom. They do inject. I mean, they do bite, but they don't inject venom. And you also have some that are constrictors, right? Ones that will crush you to death, right? So you can say there's 3 different types of snake categories. But we'll just leave it to venomous and non-venomous snakes. You wouldn't put your hand in that hole because you don't know which one is going to bite you. So the non-venomous ones represents snakes that are not evil, that cannot cause harm to you, while the ones who are can cause harm. But are you willing to take a chance to retrieve your phone and get bitten? I used to want validation from. Oh, we all do, Quentin. Don't worry about that. That is something we all we have all been on that road. Like, and that is through psychological warfare and manipulation. All black people. Anytime you see interracial marriages, the majority of people want that. And even if people are not in interracial marriages, they still want validation. Because in our mind, we believe that they are God on the earth, right? We think that they are blameless. But you have to dig into. I'm trying to think